Hello, and welcome to today's Roads and Bridges webcast. Our topic this afternoon is TxDOT's Model-Based Design, Construction, and Digital Transformation Journey, sponsored by Trimble. I'm Ryan Curtis with Endeavor's Building and Construction Group, and to begin, let me explain how you can participate in today's presentation. First, if you have any technical difficulties during today's session, simply type your issue into the Ask a Question box, and a member of our team will assist you. You can also click on the question mark help button in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. Additionally, we welcome your questions during today's event. We will answer as many questions as possible during the Q&A session that will follow the main presentation. But please, feel free to send in your questions at any time. To do so, once again, simply type your question into the Ask a Question box and click on the Send button. And also, please be aware that today's session is being recorded and will be available on the Roads and Bridges website within the next week. You'll be notified by email when the archive is available. Now, let's meet today's speakers. Jacob Tambunga is the Director of Digital Delivery for the Texas Department of Transportation. As the director, Jacob has engaged in several national studies and strategic initiatives to help advance digital delivery in Texas. He will be joined by Douglas Reichard, who is the Director of Industry Strategy for the state and federal government at Trimble. Douglas serves the industry as a thought leader for digital transformation in all forms of transportation and infrastructure. Now, let me turn things over to our presenters. Jacob and Douglas, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Gosh, it sounds so lofty, Jacob. It makes us feel like we're at some level here. Well, thank everybody for your time today. I think what I'll do is I'm going to start this off by setting the kind of level setting or setting the table a little bit. Our involvement with TxDOT on their digital journey process or transformation journey started about 2.5 years ago. And per Jacob, I think for them, it started like 3 years ago. And the story of how we got started was we connected, we had a couple of discussions, we did some remote presentations, and we realized there was a couple things that were happening. One, Trimble does a lot more than just survey and construction technology solutions, and they didn't know a lot of the things that we were up to and the technologies that we had. And two, in order to, Jacob knew about it and a few of his staff knew about it, but we needed to cast a wider net and get exposure of some of those things to others from within the different parts of the organization, not just design, but construct and survey as well. And it culminated in a workshop we did where the best part of what we did, and Jacob, you can chime in on this, but the best part I think of what we did is we took your actual data and then processed it. And when we did the workshop, and there were probably 25, 30 people in the room, and then there were another 15 or 20 online that were watching. And we went through a journey of what was possible with a few different models. But I think the thing that made it interesting was the approach we took, because we would present and then we would talk. We would talk a little bit, but then more importantly, TxDOT was presenting back to us, because in that meeting, we did not know a lot about the different processes and whatnot that TxDOT had in the way that they operated. So we'd already learned a lot, but we learned more during that workshop than it set the standard for the way we interacted. Since it has set the standard with the approach we take with all departments of transportation that we work with. The workshop approach is really a good way to go. So having said all that, first question for Jacob: was there you could use the term compelling event that caused? What was the impetus for this? Why did TxDOT get started on this journey?
Sure. Thanks, Doug. So if you want to go ahead and go to slide 3, and then I will kind of talk about it a little bit. So we've been, exploring going, first of all, to 3D modeling for a while. We'd had traditionally used GeoPack as our primary design platform. And as it started to get, moving away from that, we started to explore the open roads technology, which was out there from Bentley, as we are a Bentley design shop, right? We do a lot with Trimble, a lot of other vendors too, but as a design shop, that's where we're at. And so we started to go and look into open roads technology, and we really just saw that at the first part of our journey as a way for us to do better design modeling. better design by modeling it. And then we got introduced to some of the FHWA initiatives, like the peer exchanges and stuff like that, I believe in like 2017, 2018 timeframe. And we got to go sit down with the folks at UDOT, at Utah Department of Transportation. And we sat down with George and his group and were able to really see what they were doing and talk about the advantages that they have seen utilizing models in construction. Now, to their credit, and I want to tell them that we appreciate all of the blood and sweat that they went through, because they were very much bleeding edge on all of this. They were figuring things out. They were way ahead of all the vendors. They're way ahead of all the DOTs. And that was something that we noticed pretty quickly, is that they really saw the value in this. And so that's really what really started our effort toward this, is talking to another DOT that had done this, coupled with us realizing that there are advantages to going to 3D modeling and beyond that. Initially, like I said, we started seeing that there was 3D modeling was a great way for designers. But then how do we make sure that information, all that extra information that we put in there that we can't put on plan sheets, how does that get transferred to construction? Because it does no good for us to really have that information in the design process, and then we can't transfer it over to construction.
Well, yeah, and we would love to, and don't take this the wrong way. There's nothing wrong with your designs, but they're not, by the standards being what they are today, they're not constructible when they're designed. So right. That's fine. And what happens on the construction side, right? And this, but the first thing they do is, if they get plan sets, if they're using machine control, they're going to make a model, right? Yep. And now all of a sudden, you start having questions about design integrity, like if they go and create their own model, even if it's just for estimating, or even if it's for actual production, how does that affect the design intent? Are they, yep. and so there's a potential for disconnect there, but surprisingly, not surprisingly, excuse me, the constructors know their craft, and right. they know how to do what they need to do. But the idea that you and I discussed was, man, I just want them to use the model in the field. Yeah. How do we get them to use, and maybe it's a design model, and it's going to come, if we can get it to the point where it's 80% constructible, right? And then we can get it they hand them a product that has way more detail than they normally get. There's brake lines in the right places. They have what they need. And that time that goes from award to construction would usually, depending on the level of complexity, it can be months that they spend just prepping data for machine control. If you can cut that in half, or even down to 20%, everybody wins. The contractor's happy, TxDOT's happy, the result's better.
So a couple of things is, one thing we were really surprised whenever we started to dive into this a little bit, to really learn. And maybe other agencies knew it, and maybe everybody else but me knew this. But whenever we were learning that, when we produce XSR files from our GeoPack designs, exactly what you said, Doug, they were creating their own models from this. And so what we ended up realizing is that as we started to model more, what we were still asking the contractor to do was take information from a 2D plan set. So we would model it, we would dumb it down to 2D, they would take that 2D and bring it back to a model. So one of the things we wanted to do was take away that middle step.
Amen. I mean, it seems kind of counterproductive, but yeah. It's the way it's done, and it's still done that way by many states, and it's still being done as you guys are kind of continuing on your journey too. So kind of as kind of a follow-up question, how do what changes internally? And I can speak externally, but like internally for y'all, like what changes how do those workflows change when they become digital, and you're delivering something that's a little more constructible, and how do you see that evolving into the future?
So I think what we really wanted to do is reimagine the way we did things, right? I think everybody has always heard the term, well, that's how we've always done it. Right. Mm-hmm. And I'm not necessarily against that, as long as there's a good reason behind why we do things. What we started to find is that there are a lot of ways that we can be more efficient in our design, in our construction, and things like that. And so, whenever we start talking about the new way we're doing things, we wanted to kind of start out with, okay, whenever we first start talking about this at the agency, we wanted to kind of define it. So we defined it as digital delivery. And what is that, right? And so at the very, very core of it, there's a lot of aspects to this, but the very core for us, it was we're taking those traditional 2D plan sets, taking those away, and bringing in design models that had more data, that had more metadata, that were more accurate, we were designing more of our roadways and not at 100-foot intervals, making sure things tie correctly and that it fits where we want it to fit. You know, that's what we wanted to start doing, right? And as we started to look into that, we started to see more of the benefits of this. You know, there's going to be less change orders in RFIs because we're designing things better. We have the ability to really improve the way that we do quantities, especially dirt work quantities, right? Got to get LiDAR information, which I think a lot of places are going to right now anyway, and then be able to use that with the model and be able to get those out and then extract assets. Assets, I think, is really the ultimate goal. When we start talking about this initiative, the ultimate goal is that. Now, when we started looking at how do we get there, right? We see all these great benefits, but how do we get there? One of the things that we started talking about was, well, we need to make a systematic change the way we do business. It has to, we can't just follow the same guidelines that we've always followed because those were geared for a different time. And so what we started to do was to develop all of these plans and procedures and stuff like that. So if you want to go to the fourth slide, Doug.
Sure, yeah.
What we're doing is we have these things that we're putting together. Now, I'll be honest and say we haven't figured everything out yet, but we're getting there. Part of the things that we're doing, we wanted to make sure that we are strategic on this. We didn't really want to just start trying things left and right and then not having a plan forward. So we decided to get a strategic plan together. We've been following that strategic plan, or we've been developing that strategic plan and really following it at the same time. But we're also about to get that finalized and published and onto our website. Right. So we do have a website. I'll just put a plug for that real quick, is that it's TxDOT.gov/digital-delivery. And that's going to be where we put all of our stuff. And it's not going to be to where it's restricted to anybody. This is for everybody to come to. Doug and I have talked a lot about, you know, on the contracting side, if there's processes that we develop, say with Trimble, we're going to develop them with Trimble, but they're going to be for TxDOT and we're going to post them on the website, so that we can make sure that our contractors understand that we know what they're going through, right? So the way we envision this changing is, like I said, systematic and being more efficient. And right now, one of the things we're doing to kind of to lay those changes out is we've picked up a couple of pilot projects. We have 4 pilot projects in the state of Texas in 4 of our districts. Just for y'all that don't know, in Texas, we have 25 districts across our state. And we decided that we were going to pick a couple of pilot projects for us to really try these processes out. One of the things we did is we brought in a consultant that has worked on this method of delivery in other states. So we weren't starting at ground zero. I gave a shout out to Utah earlier because our consultants worked a lot with Utah. So we were able to bring those 20 plus projects that they've done and the experiences that they've learned from there and bring them to Texas and really start from not ground zero. We were able to start a couple of the steps up. And so what we decided to do was start with a small pilot project. This is our very first pilot project where the model will be the legal document in the state of Texas. It's in our San Antonio district, but it's really a small project. It's a small town outside of San Antonio called Staples, Texas. And what this project is, it's 0.3 of a mile. So it's really, really small. This is one that if you looked at it from a contracting perspective and you saw it in traditional design, bid, build, it may not really catch your eye too much, right? It's about a $2 million project. So it's not a huge project. But we decided we want to start small on this. And really the reasoning is because we were going to do full depth reconstruction on this job. And we feel like there's a lot of benefit from getting model-based quantities for earthwork. So that's where we started. Now, I mentioned a minute ago, we have our strategic plan and all that stuff too that we're developing. So we're really going in parallel with a couple of these things. we're developing stuff for the pilot project while trying to feed into that larger statewide initiative that we have. And so the things we learn in this small pilot will be translated directly over to that bigger program that we're running. And then we're going to go to the next pilot and then take those lessons and continually do that. I get asked all the time, well, when are we doing this? What is the time frame that we're going to have to do this all across the state? And my answer is, like any engineer, anybody in the industry will say, is it depends. It depends on when we're ready to get there, right? Because we're not going to sit there and say, okay, Texas, with the amount of projects that we have out every month, we're going to pick a certain letting date, and that as of that date, all projects are going to go digital delivery. That's not a recipe for success. So what we wanted to do was make sure that we have enough pilots and build enough that we can have our processes that are scalable and repeatable across the state. In my head right now, the way that this looks is that we maybe potentially find a type of project that we do across the state. So we'll say maybe widenings. Those are traditionally a lot easier to do. And so maybe we do widenings at some point in the future across the state and say, okay, all widening jobs will be done using the digital delivery method. Again, I'm not going to say a date because I don't know it yet. We have to get there. So, but I think that's how we've kind of approached this transformation of our processes, is not only by being theoretical about it, but actually going out and trying it. And I'm a firm believer that, even if we make mistakes on this project, which we will, we're not scared of making mistakes because we'll still learn from it. And the overall program will benefit from those lessons learned that we get from these pilot projects.
Heck yeah, crawl, walk, run, right? Like you're not going to just flip a switch. Even a year from now, you're not going to flip a switch. But I think that the approach you're taking is solid, and it aligns, for what it's worth, with countries like Norway, that when they did this, because they're already there, when they did this, they took a similar approach. And one of the things I saw that, when I looked at this particular slide, here's slide 4, the standards development, that it's just mission critical that everybody's working on the same sheet of music, and that the standards are consistent, not only across the state of Texas, but like across the country, at some point. Yeah. We're going to get there. And I know that's a Federal Highways, and AxDOT initiative.
Well,
Trimble meets a lot with Federal Highways. We provide. Oh, go ahead, Seth. Sorry.
Let me just plug on that real quick, Doug. And so, as part of it, and you're exactly right, we are looking at standard definitions and level of development definitions and things like that. And so we've decided as Texas that we are going to be involved in these FHWA and AxDOT initiatives to really work with other DOTs, so that there is that, exactly what you're talking about, Doug, that standardization, not just across Texas, but across the nation.
Amen. Because, and let's face it, if you're some of the larger contractors, they operate in multiple states. So that certainly makes and the designers as well. In meeting with Federal Highways, one of the things that they have stressed to us that is just, they see as table stakes or part and parcel to the success of any digital transformation program related to our industry, it's interoperability. And not just interoperability between an individual vendor's solutions, but interoperability between all vendor solutions, which, as we just talked about, data standards is certainly something that's going to make that a lot easier. But, the elimination of proprietary file formats, the elimination of, neutralization to some degree of a CAD environment, so that you can allow people to do the work in the way they want to do it. And that the data, most important thing about this, right, is that the data that starts way early, pre-design even, that data makes it all the way through across the asset lifecycle, so that when on the backside, when they're spending 80% of the budget for that asset, managing and maintaining it, they have the best data set that they could have. And that's a long range goal for TxDOT too. But the interoperability component of this, could you kind of comment on that and what approach you're taking with your pilots?
Yeah, so absolutely. So I think one of the things so back up a little bit, whenever we start talking about interoperability, I think that's one of the most important discussions that we have to have. Because one of the things is, as we start to move towards this file or this project delivery method, there's a lot of people and a lot of entities that are going to be affected by this, right? And so when we start talking about, we always talk about the smaller firms, whether it be in construction or in design or whatever. We want to make sure that they're able to have a seat at the table too. We don't want it to just be for the people that can afford the whatever software that's out there. The way that this interoperability really should and is going to work, I believe, is that we can utilize that data in any format that we want to. And so at the end of the day, I've always been taught, we're delivering projects and that's our goal at the department. And while that's true, and it's very true, one of the things that we need to realize is that we're also creating data. Data is an important part of what we do. Data is an important part of our decision making. And so everything that we do has a data component to it. Now, our long-term goal to talk about what you're talking about, Doug, is a long-term is the asset management portion of this. Because as a department, we want to make sure that we understand what is on our system, whether it's above ground, on the roadway, around the roadway, or under the ground. We want to make sure that we know what's there, because when we do that, we have the ability to make more data-driven decisions for the best outcome of a particular project and for the department system as a whole.
When we talked, you're doing so great. Like you're answering some of these, like my next question before I even needed to ask it, and that means we're doing this right, I think. One of the things that I wanted to touch on too is the changes that are going to be out there for the contracting community.
Yeah.
How have you engaged the contracting community? I mean, I'm aware of some of the things you've done, but like, what have you done in preparation for these changes to engage the contracting community and not only like just say, here's what we're doing, but like, what do you need from us?
Right. So one of the decisions we made early on was to make sure contractors were involved. Because this is such a big shift in the way we deliver projects to our contracting community, we didn't want it to be the approach of, as a DOT, we've developed this system. Now, contractors, you go use this system or this method of delivery, and if you can't, too bad. That's not the approach we wanted to take. And so what we started to do, this has been probably four plus years ago, is we started a task force with the Texas AGC, a 3D task force for us to talk about all the components of 3D design and how it translates ultimately to digital delivery. As part of those conversations, we've gotten a lot of contractor feedback on the likes and the dislikes of this method and how we can help them get prepared for it. And one of the things that we have started to work with our AGC folks with is, how do we stair step this? Not necessarily like this pilot project that's on the screen right here. It's not that we're going to go a full model only deliverable. We have several what we call stair step deliverables that are in there. So instead of a traditional plan and profile sheet that is cut up on 11 by 17 pages, what we have is a roll plot. Now that roll plot is very similar to a schematic, but it is for information only. It won't be a legal document. It'll be something that they can reference. So getting that input from the contractors is a big part of it. Now, another thing that we recently did, I think this was like 2 weeks ago, we had a workshop with our AGC folks. And what we did was we took those deliverables from this pilot project and we sat down with them here on our campus and said, let's work on these together.
Right.
Y'all work in them in whatever software you have and let us know what challenges that you find. And that really opened up a really good dialogue on several things, and one of those being phase modeling for TCP, for traffic control plans, right? The advantages of those, what is the level of detail that we need to go to those, things that we kind of knew, but really got affirmation from whenever we spoke with our contractors. So this work group that we're in with them, we meet quarterly, and we are consistently giving them updates as to this is what we're doing and asking them for feedback. And I think that's the way that we really decided that we wanted to move forward with our contracting community, because we felt they needed a seat at the table as well.
No, that's really helpful. And part of this is it's so important to engage the rest of the community to get that feedback. And I applaud the efforts that you're taking, because I can tell you our brothers in the contracting space appreciate it. And with most of the contractors being, not large companies that have tons of resources, it dovetails into some of the questions we're seeing at the bottom here, which I want to get to real quickly. But I just want to put something up here so that those who may be familiar with Trimble, may not be familiar with Trimble, these are the things that we do. Our approach is an asset lifecycle approach. We don't just talk about digital project delivery, design, construct, build, operate, maintain. We talk about it in the sense that everything's connected. The flow of that data is critical. We're not trying to dominate the space and own everything. We know we can't do that, and we don't want to do that. But what we want to do is facilitate data transfer across the asset lifecycle, so we can do the things like what Jacob just described. And then lastly, quick plug, shameless plug, if you want to learn more about what Trimble's doing, Innovate 2024. Take a picture of this. May 14th to 16th next year, it's going to be our owners conference, and there will be a large focus on departments of transportation. Now, having said all that, thank you, and let's take a look at some questions. I don't know if there you go. Okay.
Awesome. Well, guys, that was an awesome presentation. Thank you so much. Now, a few of you have already submitted questions, so we're going to jump right in. And a reminder, if you'd like to submit a question, just simply type your question into the Ask a Question box and hit the send button. All right. So the first question is, why can't the model be used to simply generate the 2D plans needed for construction?
Can I make a suggestion? There's a couple things here, Jacob. If you look at those questions from Richard, they kind of all come together probably in the same answer, right? Just giving you the context that there's a couple of good questions there from Richard, and let's try to address all of them at once.
Yeah. So let me start with that. So the question was, why can't the 3D models be used to create digital 2D plan sets? And that's what we're doing now. That absolutely can happen. But the problem that you have with 2D plan sets is that you can't visualize things as well as you can whenever you have a 3D model. Now, we're not just talking about in the design phase. We're also talking about in the construction phase, in the inspection phase. There's a lot of benefit of being able to see what the design intent was in a 3D model versus on a 2D plan set. One of the things I've heard is plan sets are something that we have to teach people how to read. Plans aren't intuitive. Now, as you get more into your career, they are, but initially they're not intuitive to learn how to do those. Now, seeing something is intuitive. Seeing something with your eyes, you can tell what is supposed to be there and what's not supposed to be there, especially when it's georeferenced. You can say, this is where we have it built is not where it needs to be built, or it's within tolerance. We're good. That's the difference right there.
Great. Yeah, that's a really great response, man. And what about a lot of the contractors have to put together plan sets for the trades? Right. Could you comment on that a little bit too? Because I think for me, what it brings up is just data standards, right? Like if everybody's working from the same standards, and there's a tool and even the smaller contractors have affordable tools that they could use to visualize the model in the field, which exists now. That's one answer. But go ahead and take your swing here.
Yeah, no, I think when we start talking about smaller contractors that like you're talking about, I think that's something that we're still looking into. I think we don't want to necessarily, I don't think it's reasonable to sit there and say every a striping contractor needs to be able to read a model. I don't know if that's reasonable to say, but that's why we're also exploring these roll plots and stuff like that. Are these different ways that we can help out with these? But knowing that model has all of the information that we need to build this, has all the metadata associated with it. That's what we're really wanting to move forward. It's not just the visual part of it. It's the behind the scenes part of it too.
Amen.
What bid codes are these? How is this measured? What is the calculations there? All of that is tied into the model. When you put something onto a 2D plan sheet, you take all of that away.
And on question 7, I'll kind of touch on that one a little bit too. data standards play into what you get sent, and if you're getting the entire model as just like a file deliverable, and you're getting the whole thing, I totally see where he's coming from. Like trying to be able to turn off the layers, knowing what layers to turn off,
Yeah.
and it just turns into something that's unmanageable.
Yeah.
I think that an object-based approach to the workflow is the answer, right? Where you're just getting what you need in the things that you're working on. That is what they do in Norway. That's the way we do it with Trimble when we meet with DOTs and make those recommendations. I mean, would you concur to that?
Yeah, I think standards is the way you have to do it. I also think, whatever, like what Doug said, what do you need out of that model? What we're doing is we're developing a, it's kind of like an index for all the different files that we have, for them to know exactly what the different files are. Because again, like Doug said, we don't even produce corridor files that have everything in the same file. That's just not best practice. You put them in the different categories they're in, and then you can deliver those models individually and have a list of, this is the file, this is the intent of this file. That way, whenever you're going through them, you can sit there and say, oh, I only need the drainage portion. This is the only file that I need right now.
Amen. That's So the basing these workflows more on objects, and those are limitations in certain solutions, right? And that's kind of is what it is. Let's switch to the one from North Carolina Department of Transportation. I see. Okay, so does the TxDOT 3D design models include drainage and utilities, et cetera, or just proposed surface?
So right now, it has corridor models, so corridor proposed surfaces. We are also doing bridges, but we have not included the drainage utilities in it yet due to the limitations of the version of our Bentley software that we're in. We are upgrading to the next version that has the more usable version of drainage utilities about the end of the year, and then it will have all of that information in there too. So as of now, we just have our surfaces, our proposed surfaces, and our bridges in there. And bridges are just modeled. They're not, the calculations are done in a separate software, and then they're modeled accurately.
Yeah, amen. And there are projects, I can tell you that Trimble's worked on projects where that stuff is included, and especially where there was things like relocations and whatnot, we were able to get out in front of a lot of those things in advance and save those projects lots of money. 3D model is a legal document on your pilot project. What's the level of development or the model that you intend to provide with the letting?
For the pilot project, we are still developing what that level. Well, we have a level of detail the level of development we are using. I can't remember what the actual numbers are on that right now, but we are using this as a pilot to see how it's going to affect the overall. So I don't have I know it's 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. I don't know what level we're doing on that right now. I'd have to go back and look into that, but it is within the. It's close to whatever the AASHTO guidelines are as of now. And so I'd have to, whatever it is for dirt work, that's basically all this job is, it's a dirt work job. So that it would be whatever that is. So sorry, I don't have a number on me though.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I think that we can also sidebar that and potentially look into that and respond after the fact. Let's see. There's one. Let's do one more. How are we doing on time, Ryan? Are we okay to continue with like a couple of these, or?
Yeah. However many you want.
Okay.
I'm good as long as you are, Doug.
Yeah. Let's see. There was one on here from Jennifer. There we go. How do we handle the crux of the question is how do you handle the liability of lesser accurate utility locations? You don't want things blowing up on a job site, right?
Yeah. So utilities are something that are challenging. Everyone knows that. Part of what we're doing right now, we've implemented a new system in Texas called the RULIS system, RULIS. I don't know exactly what that stands for.
Yeah,
but really, what that is it's trying to get us to where we have deliverables on our relocations and any sort of permit that comes in that has a level of accuracy to it, right? So moving forward, we'll be able to get more accurate information. Now, as of now, we're kind of handcuffed by whatever our supervisors give us. And a lot of times, if it's like a high pressure gas line or something like that, we'll pothole it to make sure that we understand the depths of it. But what we're doing in other instances where we don't have that level A SU is we will just go to our TAC code. So it's our transportation access code, I think, or Texas administrative code that has our different depths as defined by law. And so we'll go by those TAC depths, put those pipes or whatever they are at that depth, and just assume those until we get a better reading on it. So utilities are tricky. That's something that we are trying to move forward with in a really good way for that location purpose.
Very cool. Great question. Great answer. Let's do one more on construction the construction sequence. How are you doing the construction sequence from the model, I think is the question.
So we are going to be doing phase modeling on all of our projects. At least it's the level what is the level that we go to that, right? That's the question right now. We understand that, phase modeling is a lot more level of effort than traditional, but we think, and talking to our contractors, we feel that it has a lot of benefit to it for us to make sure that things fit like they're supposed to. The example I like to give is, when you have inexperienced designers and you tell them we're going to cut down a certain number of feet, they'll leave a vertical wall there and say, okay, we can put traffic right here next to that. Well, we all know that you can't put a vertical wall on a cut. It has to be stabilized. And people if you don't know that, you don't know that. So those are things you can readily see in a model versus on a plan sheet. Even if you have a typical section, it's easy to overlook that. And so that's one of the benefits we see, along with quantities. Contractors have been asking, it's really helpful if we have these quantities phased out too. And so that's another reason that we're looking into phasing those TCP models.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, guys, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but for those questions we didn't have time to answer, we'll be getting back to you via email. And that concludes today's webcast. On behalf of Roads and Bridges, I'd like to thank Jacob and Douglas for their fascinating presentation, Trimble for sponsoring today's event, and of course, all of you for joining. Have a great rest of the day.